Hi, this is Angelina Asante. Welcome to another episode of Bang a Yui. I'm excited today to talk to Dr. Paul Thornton, who's an executive administrator at Florida Gulf Coast University, and he is going to talk about his books. He's a multiple award-winning author, and he writes fiction and nonfiction. Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good morning. How are you?
How are you?
Oh, I'm just fine, thanks.
So I have read one of your books, and that is The Joy of Cruising. It was a lot of fun. There were great stories about people and their adventures all over the world. How did you get started, first of all, writing, and what made you decide to write a book about cruising?
Well, I'm glad that you found The Joy of Cruising a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write, and it made me want to write more about cruising. But to answer your question about how I got into writing, it really was, I became a writer accidentally. I was tasked with giving a talk at my daughter's wedding, to the wedding reception, and I wasn't excited about that. And I said to my daughter, well, what am I supposed to talk about? And she said, talk about memories of me growing up. And so I did. And I shared some things at the wedding reception that I had never shared. I had kept secret for over 30 years. They were relevant to my daughter growing up, and there was no way I could talk about memories of my daughter growing up without talking about the most powerful memory of all. And so I told that story. And I had to put some context around the stories. And so in the process of doing that, I shared some things that I had never shared with anyone. And the more I shared, the better I felt. It was like I was liberated. I felt this huge weight lifting off my shoulders. And as they say in Hollywood, at the end of the talk, there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Aww.
And when I got back to my hotel room that night, I had to, I said, I have to recapture that feeling that I had when I was sharing that story. And so I just started writing. And I wrote the first chapter, or I started the first chapter of my memoir the night of that wedding.
Well, now, let me stop you for a second, because hearing this, now I've known you for years, you're saying the words, my daughter wanted me to speak at her wedding, but I didn't want to. Let me just tell the audience, he's an introvert. He's a professed introvert, and that's why he was hesitant about speaking at his daughter's wedding. I just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
I'm an off-the-charts introvert, but in all my years in corporate management and corporate leadership, and then educational management and leadership, I've had to speak in public many times, and I've gotten fairly comfortable with it. I'm okay at it. I'm actually fairly good at it, but I never like it, and so I was reluctant to do it at my daughter's wedding. But wow, am I glad it changed giving that speech changed my life.
So now you're saying you started writing your memoir. Now, what is the name of the memoir?
Well, the memoir is very provocatively titled "White Man's Disease." It is not a provocative book, but I understand that's a provocative title. It is not about race, which surprises people. There is a backstory to why it was named White Man's Disease, and it's an interesting backstory. But that's the name of the book.
So now, what is the topic of that book? Because I haven't read that. That's your nonfiction, or I guess they're all nonfiction. But what is that book about exactly?
Yes, it's my memoir, and so it talks about. It really starts when I was 29 years old, and I endured a traumatic event at age 29, and my daughter was 6 years old. And so the memoir covers the period from when I incurred the traumatic events through till like like adulthood, from 29 through, well, really it ended, with me at FGCU. So it covers the second part of my life, and it's an inspirational memoir. I describe it in marketing materials as poignant, sad, tragic, funny, and compelling. And you might say, well, how could it be all of those things? How can a book that's tragic, and there was tragedy in the book, there's death in the book. Obviously, I survived the trauma at age 29, but not everyone fared as well. So there are moments where the book hits very low lows, but they're very high highs, and there are some laugh out loud moments. So you might say, how can that be? But all of those elements are in the book.
Well, I'm going to pick that book up today. I have not read that, but I read the reviews, and you won several very prestigious awards for that book.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the one award I won for that book. It's called a North Street Book Prize. And I won several awards for a couple of my books. But the reason that I am particularly proud of that one, well, all the awards I've won have been things like finalists or honorable mention or what have you. With the North Street Book Prize, I was the winner. So it wasn't like I was a finalist. I was the winner. It was a judged competition. There was a monetary prize.
Nice.
There's a nice press release. I actually quote the press release in my on my website and in my subsequent books in the about the author section. So I'm very proud of that award, although I won some other awards as well.
Now, I was excited about, now you'll have to remind me the release date, but I saw on Facebook you said, I just released the Cruising Interrupted book, the sequel to The Joy of Cruising. And I said, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were even putting this book out, because the first book was so much fun. I told so many people about that book, because what I love, like with a cookbook, I want to see the pictures. That's what I love about this book. You have pictures of the people you're talking about, and you talk about the locations, and you really bring the readers into the book, and it makes you smile and feel good. So tell us about Cruising Interrupted.
So writing The Joy of Cruising was just a blast to write, and it did, it sold well globally, actually, because it's comprised of about 30 cruise personalities from around the world, several in UK, one in Australia, one in New Zealand, and then the rest are in the U.S. And it's just stories. So it's not a guide to cruising. It's about passionate cruisers who have a story to tell, and I just wanted to share the story. I just felt like the story would be of interest to other passionate cruisers, or even just to others who might consider cruising. And so that was so much fun, and so it was kind of an easy decision to write a sequel to that. And so I started a sequel called More Joy of Cruising. And it was going to be pretty much the same format, just introduce or interviewing passionate cruisers and talking about ways in which they pursue their passion. And I was about halfway through that book. Had interviewed more than half of the people who were featured, and I was in the process of transcribing interviews, and then the pandemic occurred. And at first, I was, I guess a combination of being in denial, and wishful thinking.
All of us.
I just ignored.
Yep.
I just ignored the impact of the pandemic on cruising. But then, and I continued, writing my book. I continued. I was going on a cruise in July of 20 with my grandkids, and so I was buying excursions for that cruise, and then I was also going on a Mediterranean cruise in November. I was planning that. That was going to be a big anniversary cruise. My wife and I were celebrating our 28th anniversary.
Wow.
So I did things in March of 20 that were very normal, despite the fact that there was a pandemic brewing.
Right.
But as the month progressed, and I started seeing grim images on the television, and especially in my native New York, first responders being overstretched and funeral homes being overstretched.
Yep.
And the Governor Cuomo's daily press conference became must-see TV. I was reading articles about cruising, and some, in some cases, some of the cruise companies didn't respond in the most in the best way. They didn't put their best foot forward in the way they handled. Because we had cruise ships actually on the ocean when the pandemic was declared. And
I remember those images.
Yeah, some of those turned out to be kind of disastrous.
Right.
And then I would read those articles. They were kind of not really kind to the cruising companies, and then I made the mistake of reading the comments. And the comments really, that's where people who hated cruising could anonymously behind a keyboard say all kinds of crazy things.
Right.
And so I became very disenchanted, and I pretty much stopped writing. And so I had what I call a self-imposed writer's block for several months. But I still, cruising is my passion. So I still would go to the cruise message boards every day, and the Facebook groups every day, and the blogs every day. And the overriding sentiment on those sites was wishful thinking. There were still people planning cruises for later in 2020.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of lifted my spirits, and eventually I decided to restart writing. But I decided I couldn't write a book with joy in the title in this environment. So I changed the name, and I came up with the name Cruising Interrupted. But I also had to make other changes. So, I had to talk about the most influential events on the world of cruising since maybe the sinking of the Titanic.
Right.
And so the book very much addresses the pandemic. The book is still fun and upbeat, so it's still a lot of what was in the joy of cruising. But I do have a lot of stories that touch on the pandemic. I even have stories of, I have about 3 different features of people who were on the ocean at the time the pandemic was declared.
Oh, wow.
And in certain cases, they were on a ghost ship. They couldn't dock anywhere. No country would take them. And so I have some pretty
that's scary.
Interesting stories. I have a very dramatic story. It reads almost like a thriller, because it really was a high seas thriller, and the individual actually caught COVID on the cruise ship. She's okay. In fact, the name of that feature is caught COVID on a cruise, cruising interrupted but not stopped. So she plans to get back out there.
Wow.
So so I did write Cruising Interrupted, but it very much recognizes the importance of the pandemic, and it is dedicated. There's actually a dedication in the beginning of the book. It's dedicated to the hundreds of thousands of people who have died of COVID, as well as the hundreds who have died actually on a cruise ship.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that number was so high. Actually,